we've been talking for the last couple of weeks has been all around what's inside the database. How do we design the database structure? What are the tables? What are the attributes? What are the entities? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then last week, we spent an inordinate amount of time talking about what quality means in a database. How do you know if you've got a good-looking table? How do you know if you've got the right relationships? If you've got the right number of tables? And then we talked about a process that you use to go through and turn your initial set of tables into a good set of tables. Does anyone remember what that process is called?
No.
Normalization. You got it. Today what we're going to talk about is the stuff that is visible to your customer. So if you've got any kind of system, any kind of software system, it's usually got three parts. It's got the input, it's got process, and it's got output. Inside of process is memory. In fact, there's a theory of cognition, there's a theory of neurology, neurophysics, is that you are your memories. That in fact, you don't store things like a computer. You store things, you remember things by pulling them out of storage and then telling that story again. And telling the story again puts it back into storage. That's why your memories change over time, because every time you pull it out, it changes a little bit. Who you become as a person is really the sum of all the stories you tell yourself about yourself. All the things you remember about yourself. So in any case, it's who you want to be as the person, the stories you tell at parties, the ones you think are cool. But we're telling ourselves stories all the time. So anyway, any system has this process and memory component. It's what the system does with its input to turn them into its output. And in us, this is where we've been spending all of our time. We've been talking about the tables and the structure of memory, how we're going to remember things. Today we're going to talk about the inputs and the outputs. It's a new screen. Yeah. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is queries. Queries allow you, queries are the things that database engines use to put stuff into the database, to insert things into the database, to update stuff that's already there, and to retrieve stuff from the database. So queries are, it's like a language, it's very much like a programming language. These days, there's a standardized query language. Is it structured query language? Is that what SQL stands for? How many people know how to do SQL? Great. Keep me honest. So queries allow you to put stuff into the database, allow you to get stuff out of the database. Now most humans don't think in query language, and why should you? So the way that we connect up the system to a humanoid is we use forms. Forms also connect to queries. You can put data into a system by filling out a form and hitting submit. It gets sucked into the system. You can also pull data out of a system by filling in a form and hitting submit. The most famous form on the planet is the Google homepage. It has one field and it has a button, two buttons. Do they still have the I Feel Lucky button?
Yeah.
Did they take that off? Whoever hits the I Feel Lucky button.
I did that the first time I visited Google ever.
Yeah? Did you feel lucky?
I don't know.
Yeah, I never felt lucky after that. It's like they destroyed my childhood dreams. It's the first page that comes up on Google is rarely what I'm looking for. Especially when I turn off Safe Search. Then it's like, whoa, geez. Maybe I should change what I'm searching for. You can also forms, as I said, to get data out of the system. There's another couple of things that play into queries. And one of them is you run a query and it outputs a whole bunch of data. And these days, we're calling them reports. In the classic old days, you would run, talking about queries, forms, and reports. In the classic old days, you'd run a set of punch cards into a computer and it would spit out these huge printouts. After my father died, we were going through his papers and he had printouts for his first Fortran program back in the 50s. He was the engineer. Anyway, these days reports tend to show up on screens and use things like crystal reports to show them. The other thing is a way that most of these systems have ways of taking input from another computer and feeding output to another computer. These are called application programming interfaces, API. And you can use the API from some other process to feed an input in, and you can use an API to get information out. So this is a process. Excuse me, I'll clean up my document. Okay. So, this class is not going to cover too much about APIs. But I would suggest to you, if you're going to be in the IT business or if you're going to be starting a software business, any kind of web environment, that you are going to interact with most of your customers through the API. So an example of an API these days, who has ever played Farmville on Facebook? You don't have to admit it, don't admit it. That just cheapens us both. Or Zynga, any of the Zynga games. Those are all implemented with the Facebook API. Facebook makes billions of dollars from its programming interface because it creates this ecology, this set of web partner companies who are all using Facebook to write their own code. And they write their own code and it talks to Facebook and it's a wonderful thing. This week we're going to talk about queries, forms, and reports. So this is our system that we're concerned about. This is our database. These queries are typically implemented in SQL under the hood. But in Access, what is the query builder called? In fact, it's called something query builder, isn't it? Fantastically easy and sexy query builder. Pardon me?
Query wizard.
Query, it's probably a wizard builder query thingy. In any case, you're going to use that as a way of constructing a query so that you don't have to deal with the ugly SQL. Similarly, you're going to use a form builder that allows you to pull the pieces of the forms together if you haven't started already. And like many Microsoft tools, it makes it real easy to do this kind of work. It makes it real easy to pull together a query, figure out what you want to get out of the database, and then hook that query up to a form so that you can pull stuff in through the query and pull stuff out. And then you're going to do a fairly sophisticated form that actually has two parts to it. And then the last part of your assignment is you're going to connect the query up to a report. Actually, two different reports. You're going to use one of these reports in the form, and you're just going to spit out the other one. So by using Access in this next assignment, you'll have a chance to take a little tour of this environment with Access's help. How many folks have used Access before?
Just not to the depth of this.
Okay, so certainly on Thursday, if not today, we'll have a chance to work in here. Look around. You will need the help of the people who raise their hands.
Yeah, I need help too.
Yeah. So remember, you get points for helping each other out. You get points for asking for help. As we talked about last week, there is no tutors on this campus. There are no tutors on this campus. There are tutors at the CIS department on the Sylvania campus. Have you talked to them?
Many times.
Are they useful?
Depends. If you want to get access help, you got to go down to the CAS department, which is downstairs in another building. But for like, yeah,
Okay.
I was like, I got to go down to CAS to get access help. But if I want HTML or anything database, I come up here and I'm like, yeah, just. But yeah, I've been real good. I've liked it.
Okay. I would really take advantage of that if I were you. I got to tell you, I'm not going to help you with that. Yeah.
PCC Library has ebooks online that you can get to, so I have an email I'll send out with the links.
Thank you.
But they've got, there is a really good access book in the Safari textbook section that PCC pays for.
Very good. Who has gone to Khan Academy on YouTube? Khan Academy is a set of small YouTube. In fact, if you just go to YouTube and you type in Access 2010, there are lots of people on the planet who are much more willing than I am to help you with Access. Sorry about that. You'd think that an instructor would help you to learn, but no. All right, so you are going to use Access, the query builder here. I don't know what it's actually called. Query builder. You can tell how good I am at Access. Forms, you're going to use the phone builder. And frankly, I don't know, but you could pretty much guess that there's some sort of report builder thing there in Access. Blue marker. And I have come to our end of our line. Doesn't know Access, can't even hit the broadside of a barn. Now the other way that you're going to do forms and queries and reports is by hand. And unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately for you, we're not going to do the by hand bit in this class. Well, we're going to do the by hand bit a little bit. The other way you can make forms is you use HTML and CSS, obviously, and something called CGI scripts. So we've got Access, helps you make forms. HTML forms can be made by hand. Now there are a lot of places out there that will help you do a form using a little tool. In fact, Adobe now has a service where you can just pick a form and they'll make it easy for you. Our philosophy is if you learn how to do it by hand, if you learn how to do the code, then you become all powerful and you know all the secret incantations and your mojo becomes fierce. So we're going to look at HTML scripting for forms. Now it would be nice if we could somehow connect you to the database you've been working on. We don't have that one yet. Turns out, in order to do that, there's a lot of coding you have to do by hand here. Mostly for web framework coding. So this ends up being like PHP and SQL. And you write this code and it runs on the server. Sometimes there's JavaScript that runs in the form to help you validate it. We're going to go into this in some depth. In a couple of weeks, we're going to learn a lot about forms. And you're going to put them in your journal page and you're going to wire them up and actually send a clean email with them. We're looking at a way to improve this course and the next time around, or perhaps the one after that, figuring out just how easy can we make this. Currently this is not easy. There's a couple of, I think there's a 198 course in PHP programming, 195, 295 That's the deal. So today what I'd like to do is I'd like to go over a little bit more about what queries are. I'd like to spend some time on the design form. And then we're going to stop. You guys okay with that? Who's not okay with that? I mean, geez, what else are you going to be doing with your lives? Having fun, sleeping, all sorts of better alternatives. Okay, let's talk about queries. So, those of you, can I erase this now? So what have we got to work with? We have got table names, we've got attributes, and we have spent a lot of time up to now making sure that those table names, one, correspond to the entities in our system, the things that we're interested in, or two, are there to help us manipulate the data quickly and efficiently. So we've got a bunch of tables, and we're pretty clear that the tables are what we want. The other thing is attributes. We know a whole bunch of characteristics about the entities that we know, that we want. So we're now going to use these table names, and we're going to use these attributes to start pulling data out of our database. I love these little books. Has anyone ever used an O'Reilly pocket guide? You guys ever seen these? I love these. Back when the world was young, quick reference cards were actually cards. They were just sheets, one piece of paper, and it had all the commands you needed to learn a system. This is what a quick reference card looks like now. These are amazingly dense. And if you get to the point where reading one of this thing is meaningful and useful to you, you know you've arrived. Anyway, I keep this around. This is my only SQL book. Because I've found that learning SQL is, for me, you have to do it to understand. And reading a book about programming doesn't really help me. I have to program. But I'm going to use it to get the format of what's called a select statement. You guys know what a select statement is, right? Select, sure, select, right, no problem. So an SQL select statement, it's not so much for you to know what this looks like, to be able to regurgitate it. The thing we're going to do is use a select statement to figure out what a query's parts are. To take a look at the pieces of a query, because then you'll use these pieces in a different way for access. So a select statement usually has the keyword select, and it has, pardon me?
All in caps.
Yeah, usually. Do you have to use caps in SQL?
No, that's just standard format.
So you see it written that way, because select is a reserved word, right? You can't use select for anything else.
Right.
And then there's an expression. We're going to talk about this expression in a minute. And then there's a from word, from. Yes, this is one of those huge lines that takes up the entire whiteboard. And the from is data source. Data source. Where. Predicates. And then we're just going to use group by. And we're going to use order by. Group by predicates. Yes, yes, expression. Order. By expression.
So when we're writing these, is it okay for us to line them down?
Yep.
Okay.
Different engines, different interfaces have different requirements on your new lines. But typically you'll see this on multiple lines, and sometimes there's a backslash escape for the term, sometimes you can just put it on.
We use a semicolon for SQL.
Do they have to have a semicolon at the end?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Not all of these things are required, some of these are optional.
So the things in caps have to be in caps.
Yep. Well, no, they don't have to be in caps, but this is part of the language. So select is a word that you always use when you want to pull something out of the database.
Like in the beginning or.
Yep. And from is a word that you always have to use if you you're gonna give it a particular data source. So let's make this all simple. Let's see where we can use the stuff we already know about. Because this is way beyond what you need to know. But the attributes plug in here. And the tables plug in here. Can I use attributes here as well?
Where,
In the where?
yeah, because you're
Where
giving it
equals
like,
bottom.
yeah, this attribute equals that attribute.
Group by is also a place where you use attributes. And then order by is just a way of sorting things and putting them in a particular order. So this side has to do with formatting the output of the query. This side is more about choosing. So let's spend our time looking at this side. In fact, let's make it even simpler and we'll just look at the simplest case. Or a very simple case. So let's use a simple case. Select from so for what's one of our tables? Person. What's another one?
Family,
Family.
company.
Company. So I'm going to say select from person. Now here the table name is capitalized. That's our naming convention, right? So you have to name it with the right capitalization. Select from person where. What's that big family?
Sutton.
Sutton. Oh, but I can't use the last name because some of you guys put that in the family table. What's somebody's first? Emily. Let's pull Emily out. So what's the attribute? First name, capital N, first name, is equal. Let's you help people help me out. What's my equality operator? Is equal or just equal?
I think it's, yeah,
I think it's just equal, right?
I think so.
All right, we'll leave it at that. So let's break this down.
But you forgot what you're selecting. For the select statement.
Oh, select. What do I have to put in for the expression?
So I think it would be select first name from person where first name, because in that way it's whatever you're selecting is what it's going to display.
Okay.
So it depends on what data you want it to display. So if you just do star, then it's going to show you everything on the table that equals.
Wait, I'm gonna.
So you can just use an asterisk there and it'll show you everything in that row.
It'll show me everything in the row where the
First name equals
is.
up.
All right, great, thank you very much. Okay. So that stuff we just had a discussion about, don't worry about it. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm asking the database, give me every row, show me everything in the row. In this table, from the table person, where this attribute is equal to this value. Do I have to double quote the attribute? Here, this one. Probably do.
Yes.
The important thing is, I've got a verb that says, I want something. I'm retrieving something. I've got a table name, and I've got a Boolean expression that describes what I want. So this is the table. This is a Boolean expression that describes what attributes I'm looking for. So this is why it's important for you to know what your attributes mean and to have meaningful attributes. So remember we were talking about a case study where a guy wanted to know who has a particular disease in a zip code, in a particular zip code. So at that point, he would select from persons, and he would have an expression that was more like this, where disease is equal to wild type incontinence and zip code equals, oh, what the hell, 97219.
What is the disease equals to what?
It happens to be incontinence.
That's a certain disease.
That's a particular disease. And frankly, the method they used for curing this disease was really cool, but that I can never tell. Especially since I'm being recorded. Anyway, so now I can get to be pretty sophisticated. Now I can look for particular kinds of data in my database. I'm looking for, let's see, I'm looking for homeless people in our database. I would look for the person table where home address, oh, no, I have to use the family table. Look in the family table where home address is equal to null. That's a person that has no address. Now, it may be that I don't have their data, or it may be that they really have no address. So now, this is how I use, this is the method I use, this query language is the method I use to look for certain things in certain tables. And we won't go any further with this, but the neat thing about it is by specifying more sophisticated ways of telling which tables to look at, you can start following relationships. So you can ask it questions like, I want to find people that have no home address but have a job, and then I want you to give me their phone numbers so I can call them. So I'm able to take all of that data that we designed, all that structure we designed, all that data we put in there, and I'm able to start pulling out specific situations, specific combinations of particular data that's meaningful to me. So if I'm the guy who wants, all of a sudden, I'm this personal information manager's owner, I'm your client, and I'm on a mission to give homeless people a place to live, but only if they've got a job already. I can use a query to find those people who don't have a place to live, but who are employed, and then I can find out their phone numbers and I can call them. And there's all sorts of combinations like this. The neat thing about this is this query returns a record. This is the input to your system, and the output is just poof. It's the row of the table. And as you get more sophisticated with this, you can take that output. Because a lot of times your query will return thousands, if not millions of records. Depending on the question you ask, there might be a lot of data. Then you can use another query on that data set and say, okay, from this data set, I'll refine my search. You're kind of searching through your data set for specific characteristics. I'm going to refine my search, and I want to find all of the people that met those earlier criteria and now have this new criteria. And then when you combine this with an API, then it really gets interesting. Because then you can have things called software agents, which are sophisticated programs that go out on the net and they find databases and they say, I'm looking for this kind of stuff. And the database returns a whole bunch of data to them, and they take it home. And then they sift through it. And there are all sorts of people making a lot of money pulling data from different places on the web. Government data sources, corporate data sources, all sorts of data sources. And if you're interested in this kind of investigative work, it's like detective work. It's really pretty cool. Finding the right thing, asking the right question. You'll eventually get very good at this query language, this SQL, this structured query language. If you develop web applications, and you're what they call a back-end designer, a back-end developer, or sometimes just called a developer, you'll get really good at SQL. The front end is usually the forms and reports, and the back end is usually where the queries happen. If you're a database analyst, you'll get to the point where you know which queries are fast and which ones are slow, which ones are easy to understand, which ones take a lot of system resources, and which ones don't. Your business systems analyst will tell you this is the kind of information the customer wants to know, and they'll say, well, we want to get a report that looks like this and contains this information. And the first couple times you write a query, it'll get you what you need, but it'll be slow, it'll be inefficient. And then you'll go back and you'll do that cycle we already talked about, where you'll change the tables around until they allow you to write more efficient queries. So that's the circle of development that you've got. You've got a target you've got to hit, which is the reports and the front-end behavior. You've got a table design that you've already done, but you're optimizing it. And now this is the searching that you're going to be doing to pull data out. Now the other side of queries, and we'll just finish this up and then we'll take a break. The other side of queries is where you put data into a database. And you can use it's the same language, it's a similar structure, but instead of select, what's the verb? Do you remember what that is? I think it's insert. You basically say, insert into this table data that looks like this, where the disease is in continents and the zip code is this. And it allows you to take data and to plug it into your database. And again, you could use all sorts of interesting expressions here, 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 to do exactly what you want. The first time you look at a real life query, it's a brain buster. Some of these queries are huge, multiple lines long. They have nested expressions, like they'll have queries inside of queries, and it's really, really difficult to pick up. So when you take that class, I think what was the class you took?
275.
225?
275.
275, and what was the title of that course?
That was SQL, it was like a year ago. I don't remember.
I can barely remember an hour ago. When did you learn SQL?
275.
275, what's the title of the course?
I think it's,
Does it matter?
no.
That's SQL. And what databases database engines did you use?
Microsoft SQL Server.
Yes, SQL Server. So did I lie about any of this stuff? Did you say it differently? See, that's always the trick. I've had this conversation with some of you before. Any topic we talk about, there's a lot more to it than I'm going to tell you. And sometimes you can simplify something to the point where you're lying to people. And it's just not true because it's too simple. I need to stop short of that. But as an introduction, I think this will suffice. So, just to review, this is the text form of a query. This is in a language called Structured Query Language, SQL. A particular query always has a way of choosing what you want to see using your attributes. You define which attributes you want and what kind of values you want in those attributes. And you use a Boolean expression. Don't worry, just write this down. We'll talk about Boolean expressions more when we talk about programming. You say, this is the shape of the data I want. And then you say, this is where I want you to go get it. When you run one of these queries, it puts out a lot of data. Sometimes it returns one record, which you can then display in a form. Sometimes it produces a whole bunch of records, which you then display in a report. And in all cases, programs use this interface to run queries against each other and to pass data between programs. So that's it about queries. Let's take a 8-minute break. We'll start at 10:02. We'll talk about forms. The delight that is forms.
So we got